Welcome back to the Star Trek Critic, where each episode is graded like a school project, starting with 100 points and subtracting 1 point for each error. Today's Next Generation show is one of the more controversial and problematic ones, and we are only into the third episode, Code of Honor. So, the Drake equation says there may be 50,000 planets or more that have humanoid life, and it could be possible that all the inhabitants are the same color, like black or white or even blue or green. And Earth could be the only planet where people come in several colors. We won't find that out for a while. It could also be possible that all the men only wear open shirts, and that all the inhabitants bang sticks together right before they lit candles, and it could be plausible the planet has an unusual culture with strict rituals. However, when you put them all together, you get a show that can be considered racially insensitive, so loses 1 point. And another for notwithstanding the test of time, and another for a poor plot. And unfortunately, this problematic show is the only one that centers around Tasha before her death. Now, to put a monkey wrench into this whole thing, check this out. In the next episodes of the first season, we will encounter a plague ship caused by biological warfare, man-haters, child abductors, arms dealers, drug addicts, drug dealers, and warmongers, and all of them are white. Isn't that also racially insensitive? And definitely not inclusive. And check out Discovery Season 3, which has 0 straight white males. And Strange New Worlds, where the Doctor, Navigator, and Communications Officer were all replaced for being white males. Isn't that racially insensitive too? The only logical solution is to get a deck of cards with races and genders on them and shuffle them, and then find out who you're going to get. And now let's get on with Code of Honor. The plot. The planet Styrus 4 has a plague, and the planet Legon has a vaccine. And since they are nowhere near each other, the Enterprise is doing the delivery work. This is the only episode where the stardate is in 2 decimal points. How did Legon get the vaccine when they are light years away from Styrus? Since there is no answer, minus 1 point. Minus 1 point for Michael Dorn not being in the episode. Either he had other obligations, or he said there's no way he would be on an episode where they look down on a quasi-African culture. Minus 1 point for a single set of doors on the fake turbo lift. Minus 1 point for breaking the Prime Directive. Legon has transporter technology, but not warp speed, so they're supposed to steer clear. Minus 1 point for meeting them in the cargo bay. This is supposed to be a formal first contact ceremony, so a nicer location is necessary. Look closely at the carpet when he places it down. Look how it's rolled up. And now he kicks it, which means it was flipped around when we weren't looking, so minus 1 point. And minus 1 point for magically stopping right at Picard's feet. Stay tuned to the end of this video, where I add a comment about their greeting in the deleted scenes. And how did they not know she was in charge of security? She was the one that arranged with them to beam into the cargo bay, so minus 1 point. Minus 1 point for Dr. Crusher not being there to pick up the vaccine. Minus 1 point here. Hagon would know not to say that to a woman in a diplomatic meeting, but Tasha makes sure he will never say that again. Yes! Troy says not to apologize, and Tasha's like, hey, the Ligonian symbol is the same as the diver in the water flag. Picard uses excellent diplomatic terminology, which means he's an interplanetary ass-kisser. Luton and Hagon are thinking, how do these people ever make it into space? There is quite a bit of reflection on the windows when Data walks in. Minus 1 point for taking 1,000-year-old artifacts away from the Earth for bartering. I think they would be happier with a holodeck. Hagon is completely unimpressed, thinking, that's not an antique, that's the Brady Bunch horse. I saw one made by a digital printer on Property Brothers. Luton's like, I got something you want really, really bad. Here comes the courtesy clap. Deanna Troy's not too impressed, is she? She knows he's up to something, but she didn't tell the captain, so minus 1 point. Luton wants to see how they train officers on holodecks. Picard says they're used for many other things, too. What a pervert. Hagon says on their planet, the women own the land and the men do all the work. That's a lot like being married. A diplomatic meeting and Picard lets out a really good fart. Jesse Lawrence Ferguson is actually 6'5" in real life. His head almost touches the doorway to the holodeck. Minus 1 point. Luton already knows what a hologram is. Tasha Yar quotes Clark Kent.
Oh my.
Now she quotes everybody's mom when they're bad. You're like, wait a second. Now a stuntman is doubling for Tasha Yar, so minus 1 point. Hagon gets thrown a second time. How did his turban stay on? Luton tells it like it is. Picard is really good at BSing diplomatically, isn't he? Then Luton says, the Brady Bunch horse isn't a good enough gift, I'm taking Lieutenant Tasha Yar instead. And of course, when you call a red alert, that means for the extras to run around aimlessly. The nice point is lost for this display blast of photon torpedoes. It is a total waste of taxpayer money. Minus 1 point because that is way over 1,000 meters above the surface. Troy is thinking, what a waste, now we have no way to defend ourselves. Minus 1 point for trying the transporter trace. Tasha has her communicator on and they can pinpoint her spot exactly. It's just so Data can make a joke. The next point is lost here when Picard asks Troy advice and she mentions sexual attraction. They should have beamed up Tasha right then and there and worried about breaking protocol later. Deanna confesses her feelings about Lieutenant Yar. Oh good, now she tells Picard she sensed something in Luton. I disagree with Riker. They shouldn't wait them out. They should just beam back Tasha Yar and tell them, sorry, we can't play this game this way. Minus 1 point for a stardate mismatch. He says a full day has passed, but only 0.07 on the stardate. Minus 1 point here because the clouds are moving faster than the planet, and they're all moving evenly. Wesley now has the role as the kid on the turbolift. And now we finally see the doctor who's working on the vaccine. And now she tells the captain that she's sick of Wesley playing video games in her room and wants him to be on the bridge instead. And Picard's like, why don't you just put him in school? Picard poses like Peter Pan. And Wesley must have the turbolift doors locked open because they never closed on him. And minus 1 point for having Wesley on the bridge when the chief of security just got kidnapped. This is not the time for a teenager on the bridge. He should schedule a couple hours on their off time for him to come over and check it out. Minus 1 point for not having somebody at Ops. And why wasn't Dr. Crusher involved in the first place? She's the one that needs the vaccine. Data uses the terminology American Indian. According to Data, the French language is now gone. And now that he pissed off Captain Picard, any chances of his promotions are now gone. Riker gives Data good advice because we all know what Captain Picard is thinking.
Hey Kim, I want you to toss them out the nearest airlock.
Minus 1 point for Luton performing counting coup. Even in their highly structured society, he would know that kidnapping is a pretty bad thing to do. According to this, Luton can't see them, probably because Picard doesn't want him to know that a teenager is flying the ship. And they tell Picard that the polite thing to do is to ask for Tasha back, and he's like, are you kidding me? We should just beam her up. Picard gives a diplomatically appropriate comment, and Luton says, why don't you come down and visit? But why do you have a kid flying the ship? Minus 1 point for the editing here because it feels like we just kind of popped in on this scene while it was already going. Riker gets pissy about Picard going down to the surface. This is a beautiful royal house, but is Luton in charge of the whole planet or just has main access to the vaccine? We never really find that out. That must be an expensive waterfall to have 2 guards. Minus 1 point for Picard not beaming down with security. After all, Luton took his security to the Enterprise. Minus 1 point for not bringing Dr. Crusher, who needs the vaccine and can give Luton a good sob story about the effects of the plague. Yarena is a beautiful woman and has beautiful dresses, but minus 1 point for her name being Yarena because it's so close to Yar. So the price for the vaccine is to ask for the return of his kidnapped security guard. I would have asked for holodeck technology. Tasha Yar enjoys fighting with the guards. So in reality, this is actually Yarena's house and not Luton's, isn't it? The festivities for the evening is hatchet juggling. Yarena has a beautiful dress, but you really don't get to see it close up. Picard is really laying it on thick right now, isn't he? Luton talks about how great he is, while the audience is like, dude, the Federation has tons of money and we can make a killing off the vaccine. And all you want is 1 girl and a Brady Bunch horse. And the negotiations fall apart in 3 seconds. Picard realizes he just walked into a marital dispute that involves a fight to the death with his chief of security, and minus 1 point for not just looking around the planet for someone else who could get the vaccine. And this is totally out of the blue. Yarena challenging Tasha Yar a fight to the death, and Yar's like, what? Luton really didn't look up how the Federation operates. He should know they won't do a fight to the death to negotiate a treaty, so minus 1 point. If the clouds are moving faster than the planet, you know there's some seriously high winds on the surface. Minus 1 point for the first officer's log talking down to the audience after the commercials that he did get the memo on what is going on down on the surface. Oh look, it's Captain Deanna. She puts her head down when she says she knows nothing. Minus 1 point for Deanna's weird comment asking if Tasha Yar was turned on by him saying he wanted her. That's totally unnecessary. They already broke the Prime Directive by making contact, didn't they? Oh look, the plague is out of control. maybe they should find someone else on the planet who has the vaccine instead. But Riker's like, oh no, I want to see them fight. But why isn't he sitting in the captain's chair? Deanna's not being practical at all. She thinks Tasha should fight. Fighting to the death is just another day in the life of a Starfleet officer. These comments are actually Hagon talking to Luton. You barely hear them in the audio. Is the captain bowing to Luton or just getting ready to sit down? Hagon spills the beans. -1 point for Picard ordering Tasha to fight. -1 point for clean-shaven Geordi shaving. -1 point for the fakest looking electric shaver the planet has ever seen. Shout out to LeVar Burton wearing the blind contacts. So Data can use contractions when he's reciting a really bad joke,
including the Kittleys.
This is not the joke, so he wouldn't mess up. -1 point. That's what she said. Oh, that's what she said again, huh? Riker calls Data in LaForge, and they're thinking, how did he know that both of us were together? The next point is lost because they removed the drums. Geordi says, I'm number 1. Picard makes weird rambling comments. What they really need to do is take their business elsewhere and buy the vaccine from somebody else on the planet and make Luton look like a jerk. Deanna calls Captain Picard entitled, and the purpose of his rambling is to ramble on to the audience. He is now pompously calling the Ligonians backwards for being pompous. If you notice, the first season always has at least one old Earth bashing comment per episode. Look closely, the Ligonian symbol is on the door. -1 point for Yar saying security people. She would have said security officers. -1 point for Yarina challenging an off-worlder to a battle that hasn't been done in 200 years when she knows they aren't here to stay, they are only here for the vaccine. -1 point for Tasha not negotiating with Yarina to get the vaccine instead of fight. That's beautiful Ligonian artwork on the wall back there. It would sell great on eBay right now. -1 point for Deanna saying, Captain, I am your counselor. You brought me with you to Ligon to help. Picard says, help me please. What is there a way out of this? And she says, none. -1 point for 200-year-old weapons still having blood and poison on them in a palace that's massively clean. Picard wants to know what the metal in the yard outside is for, and Data says, it's so I can make another joke. Data is thinking, oh look, I can make another joke here too. Tasha says, you know, he actually is kind of hot stuff. Hagon brings in the weapons, and you can see in the background more Ligonian symbols. Deanna and Tasha are both thinking, oh look, they brought us shoes. Tasha's thinking, how the heck is my foot gonna get into this? Now the light show begins. They set that up really fast, didn't they? -1 point for another first officer's log talking down to the audience like we all forgot what happened before the commercial break. -1 point for letting the kid on the turbolift sit on the bridge during a crisis situation. -1 point for Data beaming to the Enterprise to tell them in person. It's highly unlikely the Ligonians would have heard, or they could have just sent text messages. -1 point for Data using a contraction. The spectators are thinking, we could have gotten a free holodeck from the Federation in exchange for the vaccine, but now all we get to do is bang these sticks and watch a cat fight. Picard quotes Braveheart. Hagon says, let the battle begin, there will be no interruption. Luton interrupts and tells them to stop. This unnamed extra goes down in history as the first Next Generation on-screen death. -1 point for an obvious stunt double, and Tasha jabs her in the back. That's not fair at all. Look closely, Tasha is on top of Yarina when she leaves, but when they show up on the Enterprise, she's towards the side. So -1 point, and -1 point for beaming a poisoned woman to the transporter room and not straight to sickbay. -1 point for Dr. Crusher wearing a watch. Luton calls foul. Hagon says, you got all our land. And that's the whole reason you did this, isn't it? Picard's like, now that the cat fight is over, can I have my vaccine like I wanted? Now Picard plays the kidnapping game. Riker is so surprised he lets out a really good fart. -1 point for going through the bridge to the lounge. Captain Picard goes in last and out first, so -1 point, and -1 more point for that ramp coming down into the lounge that's never seen again. Yarina is very color coordinated, but she violated their agreement by not dying. So somebody had to die for him to give them the vaccine? Dr. Crusher tells off Luton. Yarina says, Luton, I'm sick of your shit and I'm moving on to Hagon. Luton's like, that's not fair, you beat me at my own game. Hagon's thinking, hey, this turned out pretty good after all, didn't it? Tasha feels sorry for him. But Luton is already planning something else. Yarina's like, hey, he can stay on the ship with you and we'll be done with him. But Tasha says, no, the android takes care of all my needs. And -1 point for the way she turns him down, since it adds to the insensitive stigma of the episode. She should have again said that she was a Starfleet officer like she did a few hours ago. Yarina takes Picard as her number 2. Hagon says they have civilized behavior, but forgets it was Dr. Crusher that brought Yarina back to life and got him all the land. -1 point for Wesley only having 2 lines lines in the show. They all should have at least 5. And I suppose some time has passed to beam up all the vaccine, and the last point is lost for the Enterprise speeding off to Styrus 4 to cure a plague that may kill millions at Warp 3, which is a fraction of what they can achieve at Warp 9. And Riker says engage again. So, who were the Ligonians? Julian Christopher played Hagon and has 110 screen credits including The Bob Newhart Show, Murder, She Wrote, Stargate, and we will hear his voice one time on Deep Space Nine. Carol Selman was Yarina and played on a piece of the action, Hill Street Blues, and you might have seen her in person as a Starfleet officer at the Star Trek Experience in Las Vegas. Jesse Lawrence Ferguson, the tall man with a deep voice, was on Buck Rogers, The A-Team, and Boys in the Hood, but unfortunately has left us recently. Before the scorecard goes up, we'll go to the deleted scene. If you've ever watched my previous videos, which hardly anyone does, you'll notice that I show similarities between Star Trek and other shows. If you've made it this far, which no one ever does, you'll notice I skipped one intentionally. Since this show is problematic, this one might not go over so well. So you get to decide whether or not this one is considered racially insensitive. When Picard and Luton meet, they hold their hands up in Ligonian style, and then shake hands Earth style. This is just like a scene in the movie Airplane where Robert Hayes and the native hold their hands up, and then shake hands. But then Robert Hayes screws up and it goes really bad. I could either say, Captain Picard really screws up first contact, or take a point for Star Trek copying Airplane. One of those comments that will be either very funny or very offensive, so please leave feedback below on how you think those comments would have gone over. Code of Honor, the one episode that centers around Tasha the most, but has problems of racial insensitivities, gets a score of 42%. Yes! Stay tuned for next year's episode when Star Trek ridicules the Irish. Thanks for viewing. Be sure to leave comments below and click that like button, the share button, and that subscribe button, and I'll see you again soon.